All right, guys, Submission Radio here with Tom Wright. Tom, welcome back to Melbourne. A lot of people would say one of the best, obviously, cities in Australia. Talk to us about the decision, obviously, to go to Melbourne as opposed to, say, Sydney or New Zealand, which we heard was sort of in the mix.
Well, in many ways, it was an easy decision for us to come back on the heels of UFC 193, which was our first ever event in Victoria, and obviously we had a huge success back in November of last year, and there aren't many opportunities you have a chance to play a world-class venue like Rod Laver, and we know that the sightlines there are amazing. The live experience is all about what our sports has at its foundation, and come November the 27th, fans are going to be treated to some different kind of sport in Rod Laver that they've ever seen before.
Yeah, well, we've got a great main event in Jacare and Luke Rockhold, a rematch of their great title fight in Strikeforce. Just wondering, obviously neither man has ties to Australia. What was sort of the thought process behind obviously putting that fight down here for Melbourne?
Well, I think it was all about making sure that we provide our fight fans here with not only opportunity to see some great local talent, but to bring in some of the international world-class talent that obviously the UFC has. When we were here back in 2015, Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm fought, and there was a host of other Aussies on that card. But the fact of the matter is that through October and November, virtually all of the top 10 middleweights are going to be fighting. So it's really going to be an interesting time to see how the whole division shakes out. We've got Weidman is fighting, Romero. You've got, of course, the championship at 204. You've got Bisping fighting Henderson. Now you're going to have number 1 and number 3 with Rockhold and Jacare fighting here. And there's a pretty good chance that Robbie Whittaker will be on this card as well. So you could have virtually 8 of the top 10 middleweights fighting here. So it's going to be an exciting time for our sport.
For sure. Robert Whittaker's another one that obviously everybody's excited about. All the Aussies are wondering who he's going to be facing. I know you're not at liberty to tell us who that's going to be, but what do you think about his career thus far and the sort of trajectory and the way he's being built up? A lot of people talking about how they want to see him versus Anderson Silva. Maybe not the realistic most sort of matchup, but what do you think about him, the way he's been built up?
He's been tremendous. He's been fighting so well since he moved up from 170 to middleweight. He's demonstrated, I think, not only his knockout power, but his endurance. He took Uriah Hall to I think a very well-earned 3-round decision at UFC 193. I'm excited about what Robbie's done, and I think that if you sort of step back from it and say, who could be the first Aussie to wear a championship belt, it could be Robbie Whittaker.
You are, of course, the man behind Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, so we can't forget about Canada. Talk to us about UFC 206, the way it's shaping up. Who are the biggest sort of Canadian stars that you see in the UFC at the moment, and do you need a Canadian to main event that card?
Well, first of all, UFC 206 is coming into Toronto December the 9th, and that's going to be a fabulous event back at the Air Canada Centre. We don't need a Canadian necessarily to headline the event. The last event that we had in Canada, did not feature a Canadian, and so frankly, it's no different than here. Our fans are sophisticated fans in Canada, and they're knowledgeable and sophisticated here in Australia. They want to see great fights, they want to see great competition, and they'll see it in Toronto. And it's just still a little bit early. We're trying to figure out the main event for UFC 205. Obviously, that's going to be a seminal event in Madison Square Gardens in New York. So once that sort of is cleared up, and that'll happen in the next week or so, then we'll start to bring more closely into focus what's going to happen in Toronto.
I got to ask you, I feel like your job will be so much easier if George St. Pierre came back. Bang, you've got a Canadian to main event UFC 206. Would you like to see him come back? What's your feeling there? Do you think it will happen?
Well, personally, I'd love to see George come back, but I've been asked this question before, and what I really want is for George to do what he wants to do. He made the decision to walk away from the sport back in 2013, and should he decide to come back, I'll be the first person to welcome him back with open arms. Should he decide to continue hanging them up, then I'll salute that as well. It's completely up to George. We're trying to see if there's a contract that can be pulled together, and his team are talking with our team, and if it's going to work out, it'll work out.
Great. Well, we'll see what happens. Tom, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you November 27th for UFC Fight Night Melbourne.
Anytime. Thanks, mate.